Carol will be talking about the history of the garden. Those of you who don't know Carol. Ryan's going to be, he's not on the tree committee, but he's the founder of Friends of Governor Dick, very much trying to preserve our trees over there, and a naturalist, and he's going to talk about embracing the forest aesthetics. I will be talking about now, and I will be talking about how you can help, and Vincey's going to be talking about the future. So hopefully we can give you a presentation worth coming out this wonderful morning for, but we do need to pray for rain. It's a little dry. So we're going to start out with Carol.
Good morning, everyone. I did a little research on the history of the garden. Carol. Sorry. And there's Anne standing in the garden when she was a young lady, about 4 years old. So it shows you that there were lots of rocks and lots of things growing. So it was there. According to my research, it was about 1946 when they actually said it was a garden. And it was a man and taken care of by a Mr. and Mrs. Dennison. And the lady's name was Sadie Dennison, and in 1958, they actually dedicated the garden in her honor. In the 50s and the 60s, as we can see, there were lots of shrubs, hydrangeas, trimmed boxwoods, rhododendrons. Those were basically the staples. And the concrete rectangular area was a rose garden. That's why someone claimed that area. And between the 80s and the 96s, residents tended the gardens and its paths. But in 1997, the community garden was featured on a local garden tour. So people came from all over to see it. At that point in time, the Campmeeting superintendent was responsible for mulching and helping with some things. And then it was written that approximately 10 volunteers were the ones who adopted areas in the garden, but they provided their own supplies and plants. And when they were digging, they found lots of large sandstones, so they placed those around their garden plots to delineate their areas. And they also used landscape cloth and layers of fine stone, which is like pea gravel. Later on, our garden club found some of these things and had to deal with them when we were digging in the garden, which sometimes was good and sometimes not. Looking at the newsletters between 88 and 2012, it indicated again, people were asked to please adopt an area in the garden if you wanted to raise plants or vegetables, obviously. And throughout the years, other areas of the Campmeeting were adopted also and maintained. Because in 2005, there was a butterfly garden over in the Heritage Park area, and it was included on the cottage tour that year. So by 2015 to 16, people were kind of losing interest, and the Campmeeting board looked at hiring a landscape contractor. But they said, no, the costs were a little prohibitive, so the garden just kind of stayed. But in 2017, the bamboo was spreading, and we had an issue with that. So the Community Activity Committee and the Recreation Committee got organized, and they recognized Earth Day is in April. So in April 2018, they asked for lots of folks to come out and help clean up, which did happen. They did arrive and did a nice cleanup, and then we added a lot of native plants and shrubs. And that's when our vision of a woodland garden was kind of born at that point. Seemed like the best thing to do. So we had Earth Days in 2019, and even that year they were rewarded with hot dogs and hamburgers. And in 2020, it was COVID, so nothing was held. But the committee went out into the garden and worked and added additional native plants because we could do it socially distancing. 21, the same thing. 2021, Earth Day was canceled. But the committee went out and worked that summer, and we opened additional paths, and we edged them with those big rocks that we found in the garden. And in the fall, we put in many, many native plants and shrubs. 2022, we were back to having folks again in the garden, so our volunteers came out, and we planted 36 native shrubs and trees that year. In 23, there was again a large group that came out in the garden, and that fall, we planted numerous plants. So we've been progressing each year. And this year, which was 2024, we had a very nice group come out and we bought larger native trees and shrubs and planted those in the garden, and we've been tending them faithfully all summer because of our droughts that we get. So we, as the committee, I think, feel that our time and labor is being rewarded because we go into the garden and see the trees and shrubs maturing, and our vision is slowly coming to life, but it will take time to make this all happen. Thank you.
Passing of the baton. All right, I'm next in the relay. Hi, I'm Ryan Fretz, current president of the Friends of Governor Dick, and I'm a landscaper that works primarily here in Gretna. I'm also from here. So my portion of this morning's talk I've titled Embracing the Forest Aesthetic. So I'm not gonna go on and on and on too long, but I'm gonna hit some points. And the slide is not up yet. You can see it on your screen. So, okay, that's us right there. We're that blue dot. The ecosystem in North America is really in collapse. Native spaces have been broken up into fragments. They're just little isolated islands, and animals, creatures in these spaces often can't interact with the creatures in other islands. So the gene pool is just dwindling. We're losing species all the time, and there's something that we can do about it. It's gonna take all right, stick to my bullet points and I'll just explain the next thing. All right, so the way the ecosystem works is the sun's energy feeds plants through photosynthesis, and the plants feed herbivores and insects. So the majority of herbivores are insects, and the insects feed the higher trophic levels of the ecosystem. The birds need thousands upon thousands of caterpillars just to raise a clutch of young. And really, the native plants are key in this process because insects can only feed on plants that they have co-evolved with over the course of millennia. Insects are specialists. They might have like 2 or 3 or half dozen things that this particular creature can eat. Like one example we have here in Mount Gretna is the zebra swallowtail butterfly. They exclusively will put their caterpillar eggs on the pawpaw tree. So if you want to see that beautiful black zebra swallowtail, you gotta have the pawpaw. And that's just one example out of many. The champion plant in this is the white oak. They sustain something like 750 different species of life, most of those being insects. So the key to our ecosystem functioning is having a robust population of native plants in our environment. So the villain enters the story, invasive plants. This is the corner entering the heights. That, there are some native things mixed in there, but that's just a tangle of multiflora rose, and just like this is just one example in our community where it looks like green, right? So like it's green, it's good, it's green. No, I mean you get out there into the county, you drive around on our roads, and you see little woodlots between farm fields. If you know what you're looking at, those bushes down below, it's autumn olive, it's Japanese honeysuckle, it's things that have just gone wild. The birds eat these berries, and so you could say they're feeding the animals, but these berries don't have the proteins that the birds need to sustain them. They're starving to death on a full belly, really. It's like their sugars, the birds are tricked into eating these barberry berries, and they go off and the barberries are consuming the forest. So what's happening is these invasive plants displace our native plants. Next slide. This is the privet row that, it's been there my whole life. Runs all along the front of Campmeeting there. if you go into the woods between here and the roller rink, between there and the roller rink, and then from the roller rink to the rail trail, and the other side of the rail trail, the dominant plant in the forest is privet. I think that's the model right there. You know, it's just like our decisions in our landscape have consequences. You know, that shrub row looks fine, you know, but the cat's out of the bag. You know, privet now dominates this huge swath of forest. So, I should actually reference my notes as I speak. Let's see what we got. Yeah, so the invasive plants, they reduce the carrying capacity of an environment. When you take, say, a woodlot between farm fields and every shrub that is in that woodlot is now invasive, you're not feeding the caterpillars and therefore not feeding the birds. And maybe you've got some groundhogs that live in there, but you know, nature's diminished. And you know, it's on us to recognize this and notice this and intercede on behalf of nature. It really is our responsibility. Going back to like the fragmentation, like my first point, you know, it's just like when the Europeans colonized America, we cleared land, you know, we just made room for our farms. And just now with the way we develop, we put in neighborhoods, you know, we bulldoze everything and then we landscape. And traditional landscaping, I mean, the origins of this has a lot to do with the colonial ideals and the conquest of nature. Like, you know, it goes back to founding fathers. I'm gonna get this. All right, which one was the architect? Was it Jefferson? Yeah. I mean, he brought over, you know, what did the monarchy in Europe do? You know, like having a mown lawn and manicured shrubs said that you were somebody, that you had power and you had people that worked for you. And that ideal has sort of just permeated our culture where, you know, we want control over our landscape. So this has been the standard where, you know, vast lawns and then rows of thorn ornamental shrubs. You know, the things that can live on this landscape are very limited. You know, it's not nothing. The bunny rabbit loves that grass. That's what you get in suburbia often. You know, if you just have landscape like this, there's no place for nature. So, you know, these decisions that we make, you know, it's like societal pressure and it's marketing. Like, why is this what's good? Like, because that's what the HOA says. This is what's good. This is what's acceptable. Dandelion? What are you thinking? Get that out of your yard. You better douse it all with chemicals. You know, there are more chemicals that go on American lawns than in American farms. You know, we're poisoning not just nature, but ourselves and our children. All right. So, Homegrown National Park. There is this professor and entomologist, Douglas Tallamy, has started this movement called the Homegrown National Park. 85% of the land in this country is owned by private citizens and companies. We have national parks that are out there, but if we are to rely on them as a repository for nature to exist, we're going to fail. You know, because nature needs to be able to travel. You know, we need corridors where species can interact. When everything is just like cut down into these little islands, you know, the genetic gene pool dwindles and, you know, we're losing the biodiversity. There's so many things that we're going to lose if we don't pay attention and do something about it. So the concept is that anyone who has land, and even just room for a flower pot on a porch, can put some native plants in that space to sustain nature. That every one of us has not just the responsibility, but the opportunity to be involved in, you know, doing the right thing. So what can we do? We can, in Mount Gretna, we can embrace the forest aesthetic. This is a garden in Chautauqua that I take care of, and you know, you can see some hostas in the front, and those aren't native, but they're beautiful. Recognizing those bad actors and getting rid of them, getting rid of invasive plants that are going to get loose and dominate nature. You know, there are things that we see everywhere, and we're just, you know, they're not always unattractive. It's not like the English ivy isn't like, oh, it's pretty, look at that green thing. But then when you realize it's pulling down our trees, it's on us to save our trees by acting. You know, Pachysandra is such a functional landscape space where like you have it there and you don't have to weed. You know why you don't have to weed? Because it blots out all other things. It gets loose in nature, which it is out there in the forest. Big swaths of Pachysandra just blot out the opportunity for native plants to exist. So in this garden, you can see just a proliferation of phlox. And if you walk by this place, it's almost a guarantee that there will be butterflies all through those flowers. And it's a beautiful thing to bring into your landscape. It's about making choices, you know, like, what do I want my property to look like? Do I want to look like a golf course? Next slide. Or do I want to look like a forest glade or a native meadow? You know, like, we need to move on from this landscaping tradition, this fad. It's kind of like in the 1970s, y'all were wearing plaid pants and your carpet was shaggy and 3 inches thick and brown. And, you know, we're not doing that anymore. We've moved on to other styles. And it's just like, it's kind of like that with the landscape, that we need to embrace a different look if we are to perpetuate nature and push it forward. You know, this is a learned thing. You know, a lot of us have grown up with, you know, a perfect lawn is what's needed, but a perfect lawn is poisoning America, and we need to move on beyond that. And I hope we can do that together. You know, don't you want your yard to look like that? All right. And,
Thank you, Ryan. So, we have this community garden that Carol told you about here, and there's other places throughout the Heights and Chautauqua where we have these open spaces like this. And as Carol told you, let me start out with, it was a butterfly garden at one point with all those rocks. It had butterfly weed, it had yucca, it had bamboo, it was a mess. Could I just tell you it was a mess? And some people today think it looks like a mess too. You know, it's like Brian said, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. In those mailboxes are scavenger hunts for kids that they can go through and find things, and then if they put their name and address, we'll send them something. We are going to do one afterwards if there's kids around. Next. So our garden was, like I said, a mess. There were those rocks, those big rocks. Took us months to dig them out. They were buried under leaf stuff and Virginia creeper and lots of other things, poison ivy. There's a lot of poison ivy. And we made these paths so people can walk in and enjoy the garden. And then we said, okay, what is our vision? And our vision is a forest garden, kind of like Ryan showed you at the end, but it has to evolve, okay? So we decided, go to the next slide. We left, Ryan made a point to me the other day that, you know, if you're gonna dig out something and leave bare dirt, you're not doing any good either, right? Because bare dirt erodes and it's not a good thing. So we decided we would try to work with what was there and get it out as we evolve this. And there's some of what everything Ryan talked about in here. But we started planting trees. It's amazing how big they are. But we also, the really tall behind the birdhouse is goldenrod. You know, lots of people need goldenrod. Yeah, we could probably trim it and make it look a little neater, lower to the ground. But it attracts a lot of insects if you walk in there. We also wanted to make habitats with the bird club, also put in a lot of feeders, but we put in bird houses and bird baths. You can go to the next slide. We also wanted kids to enjoy this, you know, so we solicited people, they put a bench in, we started the scavenger hunt because we want kids to enjoy nature, because my grandkids came to Earth Day this year and they were very like, why do you pull that out? Why do you leave that? And I think educating our kids really helps too. So you also, when you plant, you don't have to use the total native. You can get different. This is called a flame redbud. And as you can see, it has a lot of color. So you can use native plants, but use different varieties of them, and they still do the same thing, and they can still add interest. So you can use these kind of plants. It doesn't have to be the redbud you see in the forest that's natural. You can do these kind of things. This is one of our beautiful butterflies in the garden, and it's on mountain mint. Mountain mint is a native, and it works very well in the garden, and it's always full of bees and other bugs. Pollinators are important. Not only bugs are important to our birds, but pollinators are important to our food chain. Here's another one of our beautiful butterflies. We did use a little mulch in the paths this year to try and keep the paths open. So that's what you see there. But we make sure we leave our leaves, because leaves are what have as Ryan said, the eggs to get your next year's insects. So leaving leaves are very important. I know we talked about grass, but people like to get rid of their leaves. And they say, oh, it brings bugs. Yeah, it does, but we want the bugs, we need the bugs. I know people are creeped out by snakes and bugs and those kind of things, but if we don't have those, we don't have birds and the other things we enjoy. Even wasps have a purpose. I know Nate got stung by a bunch of bees here, and they're not all great because some of them are invasives. Some of our insects are invasive, not just our plants, but our insects. So one of the other things is, you can see this is, when we started working in this garden, it was really hot in the summer because there was no shade. We swelter in the summer, just watering and pulling the hose. But as you can see, it's starting to get shadier and shadier. This garden will evolve. Some of that goldenrod won't be there once these trees grow. And it's amazing how fast they're growing. We planted over 200, maybe 300 native shrubs, trees in this small space. And this is really, besides Heritage Park, and down by the creek, we planted 75 native shrubs and trees where there was just grass. It was being mowed. So that's, next slide. And then we interspersed it with, this is bee balm, and there's a still bee in the background. We're interspersing it with plants that will grow in the woods where we can with the shade right now. So we're trying to evolve each year as the garden evolves. And it's a little blurry, the tree in the front. That's a sourwood tree. And sourwood trees get a beautiful red color. When you walk around Campmeeting, Chautauqua, you don't go, wow, in the fall, like, where's that color? So we're trying to bring color in too. I think walking through this community, we have a lot of people in the summer who walk through and admire the cottages, but wouldn't it be cool if they walked through and said, wow, look at this color. Go ahead. Here's just, so that's Vincey's gonna come up next. This is Vincey's gonna talk about how it's gonna look and evolve.
So, when we think about forest and trees, often when we think about the future, we're thinking, well, are we on the 50 to 100 year plan here? Yes, we kind of are. But like any good forest, the one that we're trying to plant here has got layers. So if we think about that understory layer and the other layers, we can kind of move that timeline forward way closer to where we are now. So let's think 4 to 5 years. That's a time that we can wrap our heads around a little more. So that's where our understory trees come into play, and Pat mentioned several of those too. Azalea is one of the ones that we've got. That grows to 15 or so feet, grows a foot a year, about. The red buds and dogwoods, they grow just about upwards of a foot a year. They get 20 or so feet tall. The hollies put on that same foot or so a year to get to be 30 feet tall, and they're getting wider all the time. The sourwood that Pat just pointed out to you gets 40 feet tall. Puts on that same about a foot a year. So if you're thinking 4 to 5 years, you're thinking trees that were planted at about 5 feet tall or so, 5 to 6 feet tall, are going to be 10 to 12 foot trees. And you can really see that if you haven't noticed it in the garden. If you go to Heritage Park and go to the place, that little grassy area that Pat was talking about, just the far end of the Carter Street parking lot there, up against the creek, trees just 2 Earth Days ago that were planted that were maybe 5 or 6 feet tall are 8 feet plus. And you are actually walking through a grove of young trees when you go down there now. The progress is amazing. And you know, if you bring that next layer, that canopy layer, those big trees along, they take longer to get to their full height, but they grow truthfully even faster than our understory trees do. We've got swamp white oaks, red oaks, and what's the other one? Our eastern cedars. Those put on just about 2 feet a year. They get to be about 60 feet tall. Then chestnut sycamores, and we have the honey locusts out there. Those grow several feet a year. The progress has been just amazing. In the couple of years that I've been helping out with Tree Committee, those will get 70 feet tall. The sugar maple will be 80 feet tall that's out there. So we actually have a very good chance that those growth ranges of those trees will hit more of the maximum than the lower range, because Tree Committee people who know way more about this than I do are picking those native species and are putting them just where they like to be, where that soil is drained well, the way they like it, being put in the sun, in the shade, or places where they get the right amount of light. So the progress of that, even with the bigger trees growing that rapidly, just the way they like to grow and being put there, works great. So do the volunteers, the ones that seeded themselves. That plant, you know, that seed landed there and liked it there and said, this is groovy, I'm gonna grow here. And those really, really take off. So the progress that we're seeing, you know, if you pop in even once every few months, you're going to notice that, and that's really great. The shrub level, that's the level that's down here more at eye level, that we've had so much in the way of those planted there. The red twig dogwoods, and the viburnum and witch hazel and the sourwood, pussy willow, mountain laurel, azalea, rhododendron, that's just a few of the ones that we have there, are getting bigger and fuller every year by year that we see those there. So what that all leads to is something that looks like this. This is kind of what we're going for. So you can see smaller understory trees. You've got larger canopy trees. Can you go ahead and flip a slide ahead there, Gary? And you're gonna see just something that looks lush and nice. Now, you don't see a boatload of weeds there, do you? You see things that look more like plants. Well, do we have weeds in the garden? We have pollinator plants. But they have names like milkweed and Joe Pye weed, so I reckon we do have to concede that there are weeds in the garden. So what are we gonna do with those? Well, those are well established now, so they don't have to be allowed to get as tall as they were before. So that milkweed and the goldenrod and those things, we're gonna cut those back in the fall, and then when they grow in, they'll be shorter. You'll be able to see into the garden a little better and see the things that are actually going on into the garden as you walk by it, which will be really groovy. Also, as we move ahead, you'll see more in the way of the color that Pat was talking about. We're gonna do a little more with some annuals, some mums and things like that in the fall, and maybe some planters of things in the spring to make things look nice. And at Christmas time, there are gonna be a few things of interest in there to give us a little bit of light and sparkle while everything else is down for its long winter's nap. So that's what you can expect to see even in the coming few weeks to months, as well as in the couple short years. Most of us have been in Gretna or have family, history in Gretna for decades and decades. What's a couple years? We're not going in, most of us aren't going anywhere. What's a couple years to give it a chance? I've taught a lot of middle and high schoolers, so has Larry, and I think you can relate to this too, Larry. Our garden is like an awkward 7th grader with braces. Just a couple of years. The transformation is amazing. And I think it's really, really worth the wait. So thanks for coming along and for your support today.
Thank you, Vincent. So how can you help? Okay, well, you can join the tree committee, that would be a help. But how can you do in your own? So these are actually areas around our communities, all of them. This is that barberry Ryan talked about, just one of many in this community. And the ivy growing on the trees, you can remove it. As you can see out here, we got lots of ivy too. You can't take it all out, but start with a little patch. Remove a small area and plant it in. Get rid of the barberry. Take the ivy off the trees. Do not pull it. Do not pull it off the tree. Clip it at the bottom. If you pull it, you'll ruin the bark. Okay, so just go around the bottom of the tree and clip it, and it will die. And then just keep it clipped. Okay. Next slide. Another nice patch of our English ivy. This stuff's really hard to get rid of. It's in the garden. It's everywhere. But if you keep at it, you can get rid of it. But start small. Don't think you're going to get rid of it all, and plant something because it'll take over. So we have these red berries, wine berries. They're all over. They're wild. Some people love them because they like to eat them, but they're really invasive. Get rid of them. So this is the Norway maple, the ivy. This is a whole group of invasives. I know we value trees in our communities, but there's some we don't value as much as others, and these are all examples of that. I know in Campmeeting you can't remove a tree that's over 3 feet. Put in for a recommendation if you have them and get them out of there. This is Rosa Sharon. Everybody thinks it's a pretty plant. Let me tell you, it is very invasive in the garden and other places around. Replace it with one of the shrubs that Vincie talked about, Those red twig dogwoods are beautiful as a shrub, but they're also a beautiful fall color. Add some of those. This is a butterfly bush. I gotta be honest, I don't see a lot of invasive with this, but it is known to be invasive. The butterflies do like it, but there are natives that it could be replaced with. And like Vincie said, shrubs grow pretty fast. It doesn't always have to be a tree. Trees help us stay cool and do a lot of things, but shrubs help too. So this is one of the yards in and people have said to me, I wonder why that's so shaggy, but that's okay. That's what we're talking about. We don't have to have that mowed garden look. It's okay to be a little different, These are very, Ryan could tell you more about what all these are, but these are all natives, and they're all very good for our bugs and our insects and our birds. So we say, wow, I don't have a lot of room to plant anything. This is a cottage that has very little, as you can see. Everything along this cottage, these shrubs and stuff, are native. Some of them are dwarf species, but they're all natives all around this cottage. They only have, 4 feet, but that's all native. That person took out everything they had and added all those natives in there. So it doesn't take a lot of space. Like Ryan said, even a pot can do it. Here's some more native flowers and stuff. Again, not a big spot, but they have a lot of them in that spot that helps out. So it doesn't take a lot of, and different varieties. The other thing you can do is you can save your seeds, and plant them somewhere else. You don't have to spend a lot of money. We have lots of plants like these around the community. If you don't have them in your yard, you can ask a person if they can have some of their seeds. They're easy to spread. These grow really well. The echinacea grow really well from seeds. So this is the native honeysuckle. You can plant this. Doesn't take a lot of space because it can grow on a trellis, and you can plant these in your space. Here's a garden over in Chautauqua. Again, they're planting the native flowers, and they have them interspersed with some native trees. So we have samples of this. Here's another one. I think this is close to the one Ryan showed you. But they intersperse it with things that don't spread. Like Ryan said, if you want to add a little color, put it in a pot or whatever, as long as you know it's not going to be invasive. Really do your research. We do have some pamphlets and stuff up here that you can take that help tell you about the native plant list and those kind of things, an invasive plant list, if you'd like to take them with you. Here's another example of using other plants in pots. They're actually, this is kind of cool, it's in a hollowed out trunk. They planted it in there, and then they have the other species with them. This is the mountain mint. Let me tell you, mountain mint grows well, and you just can't believe the insects that love this mountain mint. That's the same shot. And this is one Ryan showed you too. There is grass, but there's also edging the grass with the natives. So some of the areas over in the Heights especially have some grass, but they can do things like this. So this is an area, this is called a pocket park. We have a couple of these, and the owner in the cottage behind it took on herself and planted tons of native shrubs, trees, and plants in here. But they didn't take out the hostas, they left them too, but they interspersed it. This was starting to grow over with ivy and stuff. They dug up the rocks. A lot of these rocks are in the area. I know Nate has done some of the ones in here too. He found a star over there. You can use those to edge things. But even in the shade, you can make a park like this and help out. We have other areas. People are welcome to help out. And I think probably they have those over in the Heights and that kind of stuff too. So this area was a garden that did have arborvitaes and other things in it. These people did a great job of clearing out, planting tons of natives. They had grass. They filled that in with natives in the back. Next slide. And they also have nice seating areas in these and make it really nice. So and there's no grass left that I saw when I looked into it. So there's ways of doing it. Now they do have some mulch to intersperse, but they're trying to keep the ground from eroding while these plants grow too. And then we, again, want to attract our kids. We were going to have a scavenger hunt. Adults are allowed to go on it too, if you want. But we do have a scavenger hunt if anybody's interested. And we'd like to take questions if anybody has any questions at this time. I don't see any questions.
I have
Yes.
a comment.
Yes.
Susan, what Ryan does our yard, and one of the things he first did was instead of using mulch, he had us use moss underneath plants so we wouldn't have weeds grow. And we have a lot of moss. It was fabulous. It looks better. You don't have to buy mulch. I thought it was a great idea.
That is a great idea. I don't know how many of you heard you. She said that Ryan had them use instead of mulch was moss to help grow in. So yes, mulch is a great one. Yes.
Do you have a website or place where we can get resources of native plants specific to help out right?
Yes, if you go on the Campmeeting website, there is a tree committee section, and it does have a list of trees in there, and then we have these pamphlets up here and they have websites to go with them. Yes.
I haven't been interested for you, the blessed to live in the northern part of the state. I think I can see.
Can you all hear him? No, they can't hear you, Joe.
We're blessed to have a home here, but also in God's North Country, where there's almost no development and the cost of living is lower, etc. But I have a lot of friends who have a great deal of mountain land, hundreds and hundreds of acres on top of Trout Run, Cogan Station, Tioga County, etc. And they've been hammered by the multiflora rose. And what they've been doing is they've been hiring Amish goats to come into to their land. They fence it off, and these goats will eat all that multiflora rose. And interestingly, the Amish people don't charge for the goats on a Sunday because it's a holy day. But what has happened is once the multiflora rose has dissipated, what we've been having or seeing take over is the Japanese knotweed. And I'm not sure, I don't see the woods around here as much. Is that a problem here, do you know? The Japanese knotweed? It just takes over, and there's almost no way to get rid of it. Another good point is Ryan brought up Doug Ptolemy. He has incredible books. One of them I would recommend to you is The Nature of Oaks, it's called. A phenomenal book about oak trees itself. You'll have a greater appreciation for the oak species, especially the white oak, from this book. And we were surprised to learn that blue jays are the most prolific of spreaders of oak trees. And they can carry as many as 5 or 6 acorns in their gullet, believe it or not. And they deliberately plant the trees. I never knew that before, but fascinating fact. I'm not sure how to get rid of the Japanese knotweed and the multiflora rose here. Any suggestions, Ryan? Or just let it go? No?
It's tricky. You know,
Thank you, Joe.
So I have some experience fighting the multiflora rose by hand, and it's real work. And looking at the scope of the problem, it's a real job. I have not fought off knotweed before. I personally am not in favor of herbicide. I know it's a real debate within the native plant community whether or not to use it, and there are people who are strictly against it, and there are people who say use it judiciously. I personally, in my profession, don't use herbicide, but I'm not going to weigh in and say one way or the other, like definitively. But I think careful use, like when you're looking at, I asked, there was a program, was it a week ago in the Hall of Philosophy, Elise Jurgen, wax 2 weeks ago, and I asked her this question because I'm struggling with this answer myself. When I look at the scope of the problem in the forest, I'm involved with the Friends of Governor Dick. We're looking at the forest stewardship out here. The barberry is just rampant, and it's acres and acres and acres. We have 1,100 acres of Governor Dick, and the stuff is everywhere, but I'm against herbicide. What's the answer? And Elise said, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and do it by hand. You know, and so, I mean, I think, barberry's pointy. You ever have all those things break off in your finger, those little thorns? They're terrible. Yeah, I seem to have stolen the microphone again. So listening to Vinci talk, I want to make one comment. Does everyone know the definition of a weed? I'll share it with you. A weed is a plant you don't want. So it's up to you. You know, like just because it has that name, like Joe Pye weed, milkweed, that just means plant. It's kind of like saying wort. You know, it's an old English for plant or weed. You know, mugwort. You know, in my mind, rose bushes, they're terrible weeds.
Thank you, Ryan. Yes, Susan.
Pat, I missed the very beginning, but you may have talked about the areas of focus in the camp meeting, like down by the library, I think you were talking about. And then up above, you've been doing work. Are there other areas that you're talking about that are, and the Heritage Park? Are there other areas that you've identified for?
Yeah. Nate's been doing a good job too, he's been using our leaves. Out here he spread them, down by the library, he spread them, he's been taking our leaves. The problem is, we are cutting the leaves up. And although that can leave some eggs whole, it doesn't leave them all whole. You really, I know people say, oh, it gets wet underneath and there's bugs underneath, but leaving whole leaves is your best way of mulching with leaves. If you don't like what I do, well, I didn't do it this year, but 2 years ago, when we bought our property, it had a lot of ivy and stuff, and I left the leaves and then mulched on top of it. You can do that too if you don't like the look of the leaves and that kind of stuff. We're really right now, but we've planted not just these trees in the garden. We have planted. Have you all heard of the 10 million trees? I know Chautauqua's used them too. 10 million trees for the bay is in this area, feeds to the Chesapeake Bay. And they're trying to plant 10 million more trees and shrubs in this area that feeds the bay. And they were giving away trees and shrubs. We have planted them all over this community. I know Chautauqua has done some. I don't know if the Heights has. So yeah, we've done those too. We also put a rule in place here that you can't take down a tree over 3 feet without permission, or you get a substantial fine. I'm trying to preserve our trees. Our trees are dying, I don't know, back in the 50s, 60s, they tagged all the trees in this community, and we went through the list, and they've taken about 300 trees that were tagged, and that was mature trees out of here since then that have died. So we also get our trees treated. We have Bartlett Trees does treat for our woolly ajalgia and that kind of stuff. So we've had a good success rate of not losing our hemlocks. Nate.
I just had a question about trumpet vine, if Ryan or anybody else has, because I'm finding that a lot around.
Yeah, that's important.
And that is a bugger to get rid of.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm approaching these spaces, these all around Campmeeting, when I came 2 years ago, almost 2 years it's been, I'm finding a lot of almost deserts, just eroded, hard-packed soil with nothing there, but maybe a weed or two, a grass coming up here or there. And it's really something that we're just kind of game playing, talking about and saying, what is the vision here? Even right here in Memorial Park. You might see me standing around just staring like this, because I'm just thinking and like, what can I do? It's that balance between tidy, not manicured, but making it look presentable, but at the same time reclaiming some of these areas, mulching areas to hopefully build soil. And these might not all be the right answers, and I'm sure that I'm taking counsel from Ryan and from Pat and other people. But looking at that, like, what can we do to this, and how can we, like, prop it up some, make nature come back to it instead of this just hard-packed, roots growing out of everywhere, and just nothing's happening. So defining it a little bit. So that's my thought process, but really it's just kind of figuring and stumbling around and wondering how to work on it. But yeah, any help on trumpet vines would be great too.
It's kind of like the knotweed and all that. It's it's hard to don't let it flower. That's one of the things. A lot of times if you can't kill the plant, don't let it flower. Don't let it go to seed. That will help. At least it won't propagate farther. So if you see, I've been doing that in the garden now. Now they're starting to flower. I've been going through and picking out the flowers. I can't get all the weed, but I can get the flowers. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for taking your time and coming out. And if you have any suggestions for us, we'd love to hear it too.